So welcome back, everybody, to another webinar organized by Princeton World for Everybody worldwide. We're very happy to have two giants in our field today with us, Larry Summers from Harvard and Paul Krugman, former colleague of mine here at Princeton and now at SUNY, and well known also for his writings in the New York Times. We will talk today about will the Biden stimulus lead to inflation? So we have a debate today. It's a new format. We're very excited about that. And we will start with no further ado. Larry will start his remarks, and then Paul will have a response to it. And then we go back and forth and have a Q&A session back and forth. So Larry, of course, everybody knows Larry, former Treasury Secretary and also Chief Economist of the World Bank and head of the NEC at the White House. So he had many, many important policy roles and knows both the economics and the policy side. And we're very glad to have Larry and Paul with us, the two giants in our field. Thanks again for both of you. And Larry, the floor is yours.
Marcus, thank you. And thank you for the terrific public good you have provided through the Marcus Academy. I'm glad to be here for this discussion. Let me be clear at the outset what I think we're discussing. Some of this, I suspect, was set off by my Washington Post column about 10 days ago. I don't, as an economist out of government, have views as to what the right political strategies are. And certainly I've got enormous respect for President Biden and the very, very serious and able people who comprise his economic team. And I think it is clear that it is urgently important to provide relief so that we do not have a K-shaped recovery. It is urgently important that we support aggregate demand through the period ahead. That the lesson of the last years is the importance of using fiscal policy aggressively. Indeed, that's been a central aspect of my secular stagnation thesis, that at a moment like this, it's better to err on the side of doing too much than to err on the side of doing too little. These, though, are qualitative arguments, very compelling qualitative arguments that could be used in support of a $1 trillion program or in support of a $5 trillion program, and could be used in support of programs with a variety of different compositions. I find myself, rather surprisingly at this moment, a bit like a long-term advocate of the minimum wage and increases in the minimum wage, who discovers that the federal government is now proposing to raise the minimum wage to $23 for a year or two. On the one hand, approving of the broad impulse. On the other hand, very much wondering about the design and timing of the proposed policy measures. Let me make 4 points that encapsulate my concerns. First, what is contemplated is extremely large. I don't think there's any question that in retrospect, it would have been better if fiscal stimulus had been larger in 2009. The Obama administration basically had that view and wasn't able, and asked questions about the tactics, to legislate that through the Congress as it stood at that time. But I think what's important to recognize is that, as the first slide illustrates, the proposed stimulus here is far larger relative to the gap. Previous one, Marcus, is far larger relative to the gap than anything that was undertaken in 2009. Yes, 2009 was too small. Was it too small by a factor of 5? That's not an argument I've heard previously. Similarly, the proposed stimulus is much larger than the stimulus or support program that was contemplated in 2020. So at 14% of GDP in new measures, at a cumulative budget deficit approaching 20% of GDP, we are in extraordinary territory. Second observation, this goes way beyond what is necessary to meet the absolute imperative of relief. There is no question that there is tremendous suffering because of COVID's direct and indirect consequences, and it is government's obligation to meet that need. But if you remember only one number that I say, remember this one. Income, wages and salary, total income is running about $25 billion a month below an optimistic projection of where it would have been without COVID. $25 billion. In contrast, if you look at the unemployment insurance, plus the checks, plus the child credits, plus the rental assistance, which is small, you spread that out over the whole year, you are getting a number that is in excess of $100 billion a month. That's why it's projected that disposable income for households will be well above traditionally projected levels. Of course, it's probably more important to look at the lower income populations, but because the assistance is targeted towards the lower income populations, as the next slide illustrates, the magnitude of the assistance relative to lost income is much greater than it is for the population as a whole. This should not be surprising. Unemployment insurance is going to provide greater incomes than employment did for nearly 2/3 of those who are unemployed. And whereas unemployment insurance normally reaches half the unemployed, now the number of unemployment insurance recipients is slightly in excess of the number of people who are unemployed. Similarly, Jason Furman and others have calculated that if you look at state revenue shortfalls, they are dwarfed by the combination of the assistance in December and the assistance proposed now. And so we are doing far more than is necessary to meet our obligation of addressing the victims of COVID. Is this wise? There are, I think, two reasons for believing that we could be passing much better legislation that would do more for our economic future. The third point I would make is the point that Olivier Blanchard has made and that has been implicit in questions that have been raised about the Fed's current approach. We risk an inflationary collision of some kind. Paul very perceptively, writing in November, predicted a Biden boom reminiscent of Morning in America at a time when it was in doubt whether there'd be a lame duck stimulus. And before the Georgia outcome, it was inconceivable that anything like the front-loaded $1.9 trillion program would be put forward. He was right, given the expansionary financial conditions